Okay. Well, we mentioned that the term meditation does not refer to a religious meditation, although Descartes is a practicing Roman Catholic. But the title is Meditations on First Philosophy, and as I mentioned last time, what is called first philosophy refers to the most fundamental principles on which you base your whole philosophy. And we think of Descartes as the father of modern philosophy because what he tried to do was rework philosophy from the ground up. And could you turn down your music? Turn down your headphones. If I can hear it, then it's going to be in the microphone. All right. So he wants to remake philosophy in the model of a system like Euclidean geometry. Descartes was a crack mathematician. You may have noticed in the video we showed that he invented analytic geometry. Now, you may not have had to take analytic geometry in high school, but it's a way of combining algebra and geometry. I took it at Poly because we did a lot of math at Poly. But at any rate, it's the Baltimore Polytechnic Institute. For those of you who are out of town. But the thing is, even though we consider Descartes the father of modern philosophy, he actually did not like philosophy as much as he liked mathematics. And the reason for this was in math, things were settled. There wasn't constant disagreement over what was true in a system of geometry that came down to him from Euclid in Plato's time. Nobody was going back and questioning the basic truths of plane geometry. And yet in philosophy and the sciences, there was constant struggle and disagreement. And what Descartes thought was, if he could do for the sciences and philosophy what Euclid had done for geometry, then things would be settled in those disciplines as well, and there wouldn't be the constant disagreement. Did somebody start circulating a roll? Well, oh, here it is. Okay. Hold it. This thing's running. It's recording it. Well, just pass that around. Thank you. And so how does he do this? Well, if you remember your plane geometry from high school, the whole system was built on 4 or 5 basic truths. Truths that were so obviously true, all you had to do was hear them. And you would say, well, of course that's right. Principles like things equal to the same thing are equal to one another. The shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line. And so what Descartes is trying to do in this project in the Meditations is look for a principle or some basic principles that will function for scientific and philosophic knowledge in the same way that Euclid's axioms would in plane geometry. So, how does he do this? Well, even though he's looking for absolutely certain truths, he looks for them by using a negative skeptical approach. In other words, he's going to sift through his beliefs and eliminate everything that isn't the kind of truth that he wants. He also believes that in philosophy, a lot of false principles have crept in to philosophy. And so I once had a summer job that was a whole lot like work, working for a land clearing company, a landscaping company, and they were clearing and pruning trees and stuff around the grounds of the big Social Security complex in Woodlawn. And so we would clear away a lot of dead wood and underbrush to leave the good trees standing. And metaphorically, this is what Descartes thinks needs to be done for philosophy. A lot of the dead wood that's crept into the subject needs to be cleared out. So that's another point of purpose of using this skeptical method. And it's going to help him clear out the dead wood. So he says he's accepted many false beliefs from childhood himself, but others have also crept into philosophy. And if basic beliefs are false, beliefs we derive from them are going to be false as well. Okay, thank you. So, establishing a lasting basis for philosophy and the sciences then is going to require that he demolish his current belief edifice. In fact, he is undertaking the same kind of project Plato wants the released prisoner in the cave to undertake, to question our former worldview and beliefs. And so he's going to have to demolish a lot of his current beliefs, and he wants to start over again from new foundations. And this is why we call him the father of modern philosophy. He made questions having to do with the theory of knowledge central to philosophy. Now, it's hard to prove something false for good. And he says, if I'm going to have to prove beliefs false in order to set them aside, that's going to be a very hard thing to do. But he says it's unnecessary to do this and would be a practical impossibility to prove the beliefs he wants to eliminate false. He says, it'll be sufficient for me, Descartes, to withhold assent from. In other words, if you assent to something, you agree it's true. If you withhold your assent, you're saying, look, I'm not going to agree that it's true. I'm going to suspend belief for right now. He says it'll be sufficient for him to withhold assent from those propositions, those statements which are not completely certain and not beyond doubt. So, like Plato, he, as a rationalist, wants to look for absolutely certain truths. Yeah, I'll collect these later. I'll collect these at the end. But, and so, for the purposes of finding absolutely true truths, he's going to treat beliefs he finds as if they were false. Now, how many beliefs do you have? I mean, a virtually infinite number, right? If this project of sifting through his beliefs required that he go through each belief individually, folks, put your phones away, please. It would be a non-starter. But he says he need only look at the most basic principles on which they rest. And what he means by this is he's going to look at principles that define whole categories or classes of beliefs. And so rather than raise doubts about individual beliefs, he's going to be able to raise a doubt about a whole class of beliefs at once. And that makes this a doable project for him. So should these be doubtful, any beliefs resting on them will be. Okay, so remember, for Plato, knowledge we get, or information we get via the five senses, does not give us genuine knowledge. He downplays the importance of the senses as avenues to knowledge. All they can do is give us opinion. Even if it's true, we can have at best, for Plato, only true opinion about the information our senses give us. What Plato calls knowledge is also what Descartes wants to call knowledge. Things like the basic principles of geometry and mathematics, things like eternal truths about morality, what is justice, what is moral virtue. These are the kinds of things that Plato calls knowledge, eternal truths that don't change. Beliefs that our senses give us are of factual things in the world that is constantly changing. So he knows that there are some beliefs that are obviously doubtful. The senses can deceive us about things like very small objects, very distant objects. Say you're walking on a beach and it's just daylight and there's still some fog, and you're looking up ahead of you and you see what you think is a seagull in the distance, and you get closer and you wonder why it doesn't fly away, and you get closer still, till finally you realize that it doesn't fly away because it wasn't a seagull at all in the fog, but it was a piece of oddly shaped driftwood that looked in the fog and in the distance like it was a seagull. So your senses were in effect deceiving you. They knew about optical illusions, right? They knew about the old bent ruler trick, the stick in the water, right? You put a stick or a ruler in a beaker of water. You might have done this in physics. It looks like it's bent. You pull it out again, you can see it's perfectly straight. You know, the illusion that it's bent comes from the different diffraction coefficients of air versus the medium of water. You know, the way light passes through them is different. So they knew about these things. But what Descartes says is there are other beliefs that we have. I know you needed to go. So, from our senses that seem absolutely certain and beyond doubt. I mean, think about it. None of us doubts that we're really in the third floor of Grace Jacobs. that, this is a hard floor under us, that you're sitting on real desks, that you've got, a real piece of paper in front of you if you do. Right? None of us is doubting this stuff. And Descartes gets himself alone, it's winter, to write his meditations and rethink things. And he's in, this says dressing gown, that's what the translation says, but it's really a nightshirt. In other words, he's comfortable. He's in his own living room, it's in his easy chair. He's got a big old fire going in what is probably a cast iron stove, not a fireplace, but I've got a fireplace in the graphics here. And Descartes says, look, it seems certain to me that what I immediately perceive is beyond doubt. How can I doubt that I'm really here sitting by the fire, that there's a big old stove or fireplace over there, that I'm really in my easy chair, I'm in my night clothes, I'm holding the piece of paper that I'm writing my meditations on, and that I have a real body and real hands. He says, how can I doubt any of this stuff? And here's where he raises what later philosophers call his dream conjecture. He says, but wait a minute. Haven't I had very vivid dreams where I thought I was sitting in my living room, just like I think I'm doing now? And on awaking, I discovered that that belief was false. I wasn't really in my living room. I was unclothed and in bed. So here he asks a $64,000 question. He says, look, if this can happen sometimes, why couldn't it be happening all the time? If I can be dreaming at some points, why might I not be dreaming now? And he says, well, maybe I could say that there are tests I could perform to see, to prove that I'm not dreaming now, right? To show that he's not dreaming, Descartes could observe that, hey, my eyes are open now. When I'm asleep, my eyes are closed. So I must be wide awake. I can shake my head to wake myself up more. I can reach out and touch my hand and say, look, this is a real hand. I'm not dreaming. Now, what do you think he's going to say about this? If you did the assignment, you already know. Could all this be happening in a dream as well? Well, Descartes, now remember, in his real life, Descartes doesn't doubt any of this stuff any more than you and I do. But as a matter of philosophic method, he says, look, there aren't any sure tests. I could be noticing that my eyes are awake in a dream. And the image I have is just a dream image of me with my eyes open. I could be feeling my hand or thinking I'm feeling my hand in a dream. So all these tests, he says, could be done by somebody asleep. So now you may agree or disagree about this, but he says there aren't any sure signs then that would let me distinguish waking from sleeping. Now, so he says, the beliefs that I have now about what's going on in my room are beliefs that I could question. I thought it was obviously true that I'm holding the paper that I'm writing my meditations on, and I have a real pen in my real hands, and a real body is sitting here on my easy chair, clothed in my night clothes. But he says, what if all this is just part of a dream? What if these are fictitious dream images? He says, maybe then I don't have hands or a body at all. Think about it. Here's the way 20th century philosophers pose this, and I think maybe the person who wrote The Matrix might have been influenced by this. What Descartes is saying here is if the mind can be creating all this, for all we know, we might be brains in a vat somewhere, hooked up to, things that keep the brain going, and all these other beliefs are being generated out of our mind, out of our brain. And so, now I'll go to this later, but he basically says if we can't tell for sure that we're dreaming or waking, then we can raise doubts about this. So